Justin, let's talk about some news from across the Championship over the past few days, because talks are continuing over what to do about the Blackburn v Ipswich game, which was abandoned at the weekend. It was called off after 80 minutes due to a waterlogged pitch, with Blackburn 1-0 ahead and Ipswich down to 10 men. The EFL say the matter will be discussed before the end of the week and a decision will be made shortly after. The two clubs were given a deadline of 4 p.m. yesterday to make any final representations. Blackburn reportedly want the points, or at least for the final 10 minutes of the game to be replayed with Ipswich down to 10 men, while Ipswich want the game to be restarted in its entirety. Yeah, I'm not surprised the EFL have taken their time with this, Justin, because whatever the outcome, one of these clubs is going to be very annoyed. And I can't think of an outcome which keeps both happy.
I'm going to go off my own sort of note here. Off the back of that, do Ipswich have a leg to stand on, really? They were down to 10 men, they were losing. So really, can they come away and be like, oh, this is a disgraceful decision? Well, I'm not going to be like that, but you get the point. It's a case of, yes, you're not going to keep either happy. Someone is going to be annoyed, but arguably, Ipswich, fair play. You've got your own interests at heart here. You want the game to restart because you were extremely poor against Blackburn before the heavens opened, and you are down to 10 men, and you had a 1-0 deficit. Of course you want the slate to be wiped clean. Blackburn have a good argument, and ultimately I think this will come down to what is the easiest decision, both logistically and I guess the integrity of the game. That's the crux of it. It's such a unique scenario, and I don't envy the EFL. I've said this already, but I have an opinion on what should happen. But I believe, the game's just going to be played in its entirety. Yeah,
I think what Ipswich will say is we've never done it before, where we've played just 10 minutes of a game, and it would also be ridiculous for Blackburn to get all 3 points when there was still 10 minutes of the game left. That's what Ipswich will be saying. And I still think right now that is the most likely outcome. But as we were saying at the weekend, that feels very harsh on Blackburn. Because the thing is, as well, as you were alluding to then, Justin, the fact that Ipswich were down to 10 men makes it so much more tricky. Because if they had 11 men and were seriously pushing for an equaliser, you'd have said, fair enough, anything could have happened in that final 10 minutes. But one thing we didn't mention is that Ipswich didn't offer a whole lot. After going down to 10 men, Jacob Greaves got sent off in the 49th minute. Ipswich only managed one shot in the 30 minutes between that and the game getting abandoned. So were they actually going to get back into it? You can't rule it out, but it was looking unlikely. And so you can understand why Blackburn will be so upset if this doesn't go the way they want.
Yeah, it's not like the EFL could turn around and go, Ipswich lads, you were a bit shit. Let's just play the last 10, all right? It's again, I think what we can throw in here is it's just a very unique scenario that we genuinely haven't had before. We had the Sheffield United West Brom game in the early 2000s. That was the infamous Battle of Bramall Lane, where Sheffield United, well, the game was eventually called off because Sheffield United didn't have enough players on the pitch due to players being sent off and injuries. 2023, you had Luton Bournemouth, which was abandoned due to Tom Nokia collapsing just before the hour mark. That game was at 1-1. That was then played in its entirety. Of course, West Brom were handed the 3 points for the Battle of the Bramall Lane. So as I say, this is as uncharted territory as you do get. And like I said, I think with Ipswich, that's where the unfairness comes into it from a Blackburn point of view, because they were leading. Ipswich were really poor in that game. Of course, Ipswich won the game to be played from the start. And like I said, that's ultimately what I believe will happen. It's such a unique position to be in, and it's a difficult decision, but I guess the easiest one to make is just 0-0, 0 minutes, go again.
Yeah, I think, as we keep saying, I think that's the most likely scenario, but at the same time, it feels so unfair on Blackburn, because if it was Blackburn versus, I don't know, Oxford, for example, I think it wouldn't be as, highly contested as this, but because it's Ipswich, who are the favourites to win promotion, and they were down to 10 men, then Blackburn are just so desperate to get the right outcome on their behalf, and they don't want the game to be restarted again in its entirety. But I don't know. It's such a tricky call to make, isn't it? And you were talking about previous examples there. The EFL have reportedly been looking at other examples in the past, and the only thing that really comes in any way similar to this, where they haven't just replayed the game in its entirety, was a League One game a year or two ago where it was called off, but it was the final day of the season. There were 45 minutes left, and it didn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. So they just said, is there any point in us replaying this game again? No, we'll just call it there. And they just handed each team a point each. But that's it, because it's fifth, sixth game in the season. It's not going to happen, is it? So yeah, it's a really difficult one. And just to add an extra wrinkle to this dilemma, Justin, it's being reported that Blackburn head coach Valérien Ismaël didn't agree for the game to be called off. It's been claimed that the referee said both managers gave the okay for the game to be abandoned, but Ismaël is said to be fuming with that version of events and apparently wasn't asked for his opinion. So just another little thing to make this whole saga even more confusing.
The greatest respect to Valérien Ismaël, it's not really his decision to make. Obviously, it's just going to create a prickly atmosphere. There's a nice little bit of needle heading into whatever happens next with these two. And I think ultimately we don't know what was said between them. The referee might have misinterpreted what Valérien Ismaël had said. But as I say, it's down to the officials to decide whether the game's clear to carry on or not. It's clear the game wasn't okay to carry on because the ball literally could not carry on. It was stopping dead in some heavy water. I do feel like, as I was saying at the weekend, some prison rules sort of thing should just be implemented in these scenarios. If you go back, I think it was Plymouth, I can't remember who they were up against, a few years ago in League One, where it was heavily waterlogged. They played on and it was the most chaotic, 5 or 6 minutes I've seen football-wise. I think they should just relax the rules a little bit and just play the last 10 on a severely waterlogged pitch.
Maybe that's what they'll do, but I'll be surprised if they did. Because, yeah, you're right. Let's be frank, the game had to be called off. I don't know who's telling the truth out of the referee and Valérien Ismaël, but the game had to be called off. Obviously, Ismail's going to be annoyed about that because his side weren't far off getting a massive result, but you're talking about player safety being at risk and as well as the general integrity of the game. But look, it's given us this headache about what to do next. Whatever the case, though, the game could not continue the way that it was. Let's move on, though, Justin, because Sky Sports say the proposals to expand the playoffs to 6 teams have received widespread support from championship clubs. We spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. It would see 5th play 8th and 6th play 7th for the chance to play 3rd and 4th in the semi-finals. The idea is to have fewer dead rubber games on the final game of the season and give more teams the chance of going up. However, critics say it's unfair that a team finishing 8th would still have a chance of getting promoted. The EFL is now considering the plan, although it definitely won't be in place this season and still needs to be approved by the likes of the FA and the Premier League. So it sounds like there's a good chance of these proposals coming in, Justin, even though there's still a way to go.
Yeah, it's been an interesting development because it's been a sudden drop of this information over the last couple of weeks, and it's one of them where you sort of sit there and you go, yeah, more playoffs, that sounds good. But then you start to think about it a little bit more, and it just started to irk me a little bit because I think ultimately 8th place having a realistic chance of winning promotion, it doesn't really sit right with me in terms of a competitive role that the championship has. And I think ultimately this is the self-serving nature of the championship and how decisions are made, because of course club execs are going to vote in favour of a heightened chance of winning promotion. But ultimately that I don't think we should mess with a system that provides more drama and entertainment in 2 weeks than the Premier League can muster in a season. I just don't know if we should do that, and I don't know if adding more games into the playoff structure is going to do that. Will it eliminate dead rubbers? Well, your dead rubbers will just move further down the league table, because going into the final day of the season, you could have 13th be within 3 points of 8th and then therefore have a chance of getting promotion at game week 45. For me, that doesn't make a lot of sense, nor does it really speak of a greater integrity of what the competition actually is all about.
Well, I mean, I'll disagree with you on the dead rubber bit, because I think it does play a massive difference in that, not just in terms of trying to finish in the top 8, but also making a bit of a difference when it comes to finishing 4th and 5th, because then you've got fewer games to play if these proposals do come around. So I think it's a good idea still. I think the pros outweigh the cons. It's pretty obvious as to why championship clubs are for it, because, as you say, it increases their chances of going up, doesn't it? And they'll take any increased chance that they can get. Why rely on an entire season when you could have 3 or 4 knockout games to get promoted instead? And the way I see it, if it means more playoff drama, then yeah, I will happily take that as well. The other thing that's been said by Sky, Justin, is that clubs believe it would go some way to helping to combat the gap between the Championship and the Premier League, because it would make it harder for the newly relegated teams coming down to go straight back up due to there being more teams in the mix for promotion in the playoffs. Are you buying that?
No, that doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really offer too much of an explanation as to why more teams will diminish the chances of a newly relegated team.
If there's 6 teams competing in the playoffs, then you've got a smaller chance than if it's just 4 teams, haven't you?
Numerically, yeah, but the teams coming down from the Premier League have a financial advantage. That's the advantage. It's not down to the amount of teams that are competing. Ultimately, game week 1 of a Championship season, you're competing with 24 other teams to get promoted. That's your competitive element, but a newly relegated team has a financial advantage. That's what you need to focus your attentions on. I think a team finishing 8th place is ill-equipped for winning promotion. They could win promotion. You could do it. You could win 1-0 all the way. You could go penalties all the way, and get yourself into the Premier League and ultimately finish bottom. All that does is diminish the competitive nature of the Premier League, and then you get more newly relegated teams coming down with parachute payments. That argument doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think what I will hark back to in terms of the entertainment element is, whilst it might cancel out dead rubbers within the league fixtures, will it not just increase dead rubbers within the playoff fixtures, because you could get teams defending for 90 minutes again in the playoffs to give themselves an opportunity to win, and ultimately diminish the entertainment element there. I don't buy any of the arguments that have been put up so far.
I was agreeing with you up until the last point, because I think that's pretty invalid, considering Sunderland were pretty defensive for most of the playoff semi-finals against Coventry, and they produced some of the most entertaining climaxes we've ever seen in the playoff semi-finals. But yeah, I think you are right. I think it will make a difference in terms of how likely it is that the newly relegated sides go straight back up, but it's such a minor, insignificant difference that I don't think it's really a valid argument for that. So it more comes down to the fact, do you think it's fair that a team who finish 8th have as good a chance of going up as a team who finishes 5th and also still has a good chance of getting promoted in the playoffs in comparison to the teams who finish 3rd and 4th? You see what I mean? It's about that, and whether the dead rubbers outweigh the cons and what have you. So I still think it makes sense. I'm for it, but I'm not sure I buy that it's going to combat the gap between the Championship and Premier League. Maybe start with the funding. That's the first thing I would look at when it comes to dealing with that. Justin, Watford manager Paulo Pezzolano has said any question of his future is one for the owner of the club. It comes as pressure is building with just 1 win from 6 for the Hornets in the Championship. The Uruguayan said the club needs to become a serious club, and we feel we are contributing to establish the foundation of that. We think the club needs to change. We feel we are changing many things internally in terms of how the club operates and how we work every day. Time will tell. Hopefully, we will be the ones sitting here and enjoying the change in the future. I won't get your hopes up, Paulo.
I feel for him, but I'm going to laugh. 2 things. You signed a 12-month contract with a view to an extension. That's on the club's discretion. The club needs to become a serious club. It's such a funny statement, because ever since the Pozzos took over, they've been an unserious club. Surely Pezzolano can identify that. But anyway, going to in isolation, his tenure, results haven't been good enough. They haven't been good enough. Performances haven't really looked like they're going to improve either. And I don't think he should be sacked, because you can't establish foundations, as Paulo Pezzolano rightfully identified. You cannot establish foundations 6 months into a new manager's tenure. It just takes longer than that, especially when the squad's been reset as well. If you've got a continuation of a squad that had success before, fair enough, scrutiny is there because that squad had success. You're clearly not working to the best of your abilities to get the best out of them. But with this, it's a new squad, new manager, always going to be teething issues. But Watford tax. You're only a couple of bad games from the sack at Watford. And that's really where the crux of it is. That's what he's up against here. It's a big old tide. and it's an unwinnable tide because it doesn't matter how good you are as a manager. If you have 2 bad games at Watford, P45 is being written.
Yeah. You're in trouble, aren't you? And we did speak about his future at length in Monday's Reacts pod to the Millwall game, so make sure you go back and listen to that if you haven't already. But ultimately, this guy was brought in because he's a promotion specialist, in quotation marks, in other leagues around the world. Watford's hierarchy have made it very clear that they expect the club to be competing for the playoffs as well. So if they're not doing that, he will get sacked. Should he get sacked? Don't know. I don't know if he's a good manager or not. But under Tom Cleverley, they're at least building something. If Watford don't give a manager a chance to build, then they're just going to be stuck in this cycle of going through managers that everyone knows they're in by now. And they won't progress. They'll just keep regressing and probably eventually get relegated. So I admire Pezzolano trying to change Watford, but unfortunately for him, it's more about the Pozzo's changing, if anything, isn't it?
Yeah, if Paulo Pezzolano can change, Pozzo, then fair enough. Fair enough. It's incredibly difficult thing to do, I imagine. It's not changed in, how long has he owned the club now? Over 10 years, not changed. So come on. I think that the one thing to point out is you can have a bad start. Every team is capable of it under any manager. But obviously the thing is with Watford is, do they think the season's recoverable over the next few games under Pezzolano? I think if Pezzolano was here for 2 years and was building to something, then give him all the time he needs, because I'm convinced it will become a success. But what we're measuring Watford up against here is what they deem to be wanting promotion. So therefore, you need instant results, you need instant success. And I think with that argument in mind, if things don't drastically improve, then his days are numbered, unfortunately.
Yeah, because that's just how Watford work, isn't it? With that being said, Justin, 5 in 10, name 5 former Watford managers.
Roy Hodgson, Gianfranco Zola, Sean Dyche, Kenny Jackett. Oh, no, I think he played for him.
Oh, dearie me. I mean, you only named 4 anyway. Did Kenny Jackett manage Watford? I feel like he did, or am I completely misremembering that? I'm just having a quick Google now, Justin. Kenny Jackett, I can inform you, did manage Watford. It was before the Pozzos.
Shit.
But I guess it would have counted. So, yeah, unfortunately, you've fallen foul. I thought that was a pretty easy one, actually, Justin.
It isn't.
Because they've had so many.
they have had so many, but you sort of go, it's a pub quiz question, because it's like, oh, well, I could probably name 60% over the space of 30 seconds, but in 10 seconds, you're like, where do I start? Where do you start with what? Where do you start?
I just probably work backwards.
I should have gone for the peak era, which was the early 2000s for me. Ray Livington, A.D. Boothroyd, Dyche, Melky Mackay was there at one point, I think.
Yes, he was. You're absolutely right. I mean, they've come close on many occasions to having 5 managers in one season, so you probably could have done it any other way. But
Pozzo plays 5 in 10, literally.
Exactly. There you go. There we go, ladies and gents. We'll have a quick break. After that, we'll talk about the latest regarding former Ipswich captain Sam Morsy and Viktor Gyökeres. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast. Before we get on to some more news from across the Champo, may I take this opportunity to point everyone in the direction of the latest video on the Second Tier YouTube channel. I've ranked the best and worst run clubs in the Championship. No prizes for guessing who the worst was, but I was struggling to pick out the best, Justin. There's just so many who are very well run that picking one above the rest, I just couldn't do it. I don't know if you've got a take on that.
I thought you were very forgiving, I think. Okay. There's a lot I could take away and go, I disagree with that. Maybe I'd have had another tier in there, just to try and decipher some of the ones that were excellently run and the ones that were good. But I think if I was to choose the best run club, I mean, 12 months ago, we'd have said Luton, and now it's fast becoming a realisation that actually that's probably not the case, because they're pretty shit in League One, and the squad's looking so bad. But I guess you look towards your QPRs, your Charltons, who don't have a lot of investment. They don't have the big investment, do they? But they work with what they've got, and they do it really well, and they recruit really well, and recruit really smart. Maybe I'd put Middlesbrough in that category, but I know you might disagree on that. But yeah, it's a difficult one to really nail down. It's very subjective. Or is it?
Yes, it is very subjective.
Yeah.
Because it's just a matter of opinion at the end of the day, isn't it? I mean, if you really wanted to, you could probably make an argument that Watford are the best run club in the Championship. Although that'd be one hell of an argument, and I'd love to hear it from anyone who does want to argue that. But yeah, go watch the video. I've covered every club in the Championship, and ranking them was very difficult. And I've already had a look at the comments. They're not pretty. So, yeah, go and have a watch of the video. It's great entertainment, if I do say so myself. Let's talk about some more Champo news, Justin. And former Ipswich captain Sam Morsy has had his contract terminated at Kuwait SC only 2 months after joining. The midfielder left Portman Road in the summer to sign a lucrative contract with the Kuwaiti Premier League champions, but he's now departing after only 3 games, and according to reports in Qatar, the club are letting him leave so they can sign another foreign midfielder. However, Morsy won't be allowed to sign for another club until the January window. That's because players have to be free agents before the transfer window closes if they are to move before the next window opens. So yeah, what a strange turn of events, Justin.
Yeah, really odd, really odd. By the way, it always surprises me to realise how old Sam Morsy is. He's 34. For some reason, he's always 30 in my head. So yeah, no, it is a strange turn of events. I guess that's a bit of a... I don't really know how to sort of phrase it or put an opinion on it, because it just seems a bit ruthless to sort of get rid of someone you've given a lucrative contract to sign another foreign midfielder who's arguably might be better than Sam Morsy. Don't know. But obviously this puts Morsy in a difficult situation where he can't play for anybody else for the next few months. So of course, January's not too far away, so it's not the end of the world. But yeah, it's disappointing. I'd make the argument that Ipswich probably could still use his leadership, especially within the squad at this current point. You know, there's seems like there's something like that lacking. But I think with that's a benefit for the rest of the Championship, I think.
Yeah, well, we haven't really spoken about his departure from Ipswich, I don't think, have we? But I thought it was a bit strange to see him leave in the first place, because he still had a year left on his contract at Portman Road, and they let him leave on a free. Now, I know he's being offered a lot of money to leave, and he had built up enough credit in the bank that he would be allowed to leave if he wanted to. But it feels to me like he's the kind of character Ipswich have been missing so far this season. Someone who's a dressing room leader, but also it's just a bit of continuity from the last couple of seasons, isn't it? Because losing Morsy, Chaplin, Wolfenden, Luongo,
Burgess,
Broadhead, Burgess, that's an awful lot of players to lose in one window, isn't it? Who have been massive to the club's success over the previous 2 or 3 years. So it wouldn't surprise me if he goes back to Ipswich, especially if they continue to struggle like they have done so far, Justin.
I don't think so. I think the club's moved on. I do like Sam Morsy, though. I really do. And I think most sides in the Championship would benefit from his leadership and attitude in the squad. I think for me, probably stinks of Charlton, Nathan Jones. It just reeks of Nathan Jones getting his hands on a combative midfielder who's probably, I wouldn't say he's got a point to prove, but he's got a lot to offer.
I could see that. I think a lot of Championship managers will look at him and think he is perfect for our club, not just
Chris
in terms
Wilder
of
at Sheffield United.
Yes. Please don't stop mumbling while I'm talking, Justin.
Sorry. I'm thinking out loud.
But I think a lot of managers will look at him and think he's the perfect dressing room leader who can be a leader on the pitch as well. So he can bring a lot to a club at this level, I think. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if he is back in the Championship in January. Alternatively, if he does fancy another adventure like the one he briefly went on over in Kuwait, then maybe he will go abroad once again. I don't know. Speaking of people going abroad, Justin, Patrick Bamford won't be staying in the Championship this season. Reports in Spain say he's set to join Getafe. The 32-year-old had his contract terminated at Leeds last month, and he had been linked with a move to Sheffield United. Strange, isn't it, how we talk about whether he could be a good move for a Championship club, and then he gets a move to a La Liga side. A bit odd, really, isn't it?
That makes us look like tits, to be honest with you, because we never really we don't think that football exists outside the Championship, and quite honestly, it shouldn't do. But I do like the signing. It just felt like Patrick Bamford going abroad made sense. He always comes across as quite a culturally flexible person.
Wait, did you know, Justin, that he speaks 3 languages? He's conversational in Spanish, French, and German.
I also researched that. I did think he had an A level in Latin as well, which I know Latin's an ancient language, so it's kind of irrelevant in Spain now. But as I say, comes across as incredibly cultured. So him going to the Spanish capital, yeah, I can see how this is coming around. I think physically as well, the demands are very different in Spain. It's more of a technical element. And I know we rib him for missing chances, but he is of a technical profile, a very, very accomplished player. It's just his body's let him down at really bad periods of his career. So I think him going to Spain where those physical demands aren't necessarily needed, probably a good thing for him.
Yeah, well, we're talking about how cultured Patrick Bamford is. I didn't know he was offered a scholarship at Harvard when he was younger to play football for them. It just goes to show how cultured he is. He's also got 5 A stars at GCSE, 3 A's and 2 B's. So very smart lad.
Is being intelligent cultured? I'm thinking just being... my idea of culture is just sitting outside a cafe with a coffee with your leg crossed a little bit. That's my idea of culture.
All day.
All day.
You go to Italy and you sat outside a cafe for 24 hours. But yeah, I think they're kind of on a similar Venn diagram, aren't they? When it comes to cultured and intelligent. But yeah, going back to the actual football side of things, I really struggle to place what level championship club he should be looking at, because he's been so injury prone and so goal shy for a while now, but I think he still had something to offer when fit. Whether Sheffield United were the right move, I don't know. I know they're really struggling for goals, but they've already got 3 strikers. Did they really need another one who's been very hit and miss for several years now? Don't know, but I'll be interested to know how he gets on at Getafe.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I think, like I said, I think him being able to physically cope with the demands of a league is a big thing. I know Oli Burke didn't set the world alight at Las Palmas last season, but he still contributed greatly. He did find his way back over here, but he was revered, albeit very sunburnt. But I think with Bamford, I think, like I said, I think there's a technical quality there, and he's played. Obviously, he came through the ranks at Chelsea. He's played in the Premier League. He's done a bit with Leeds. He's been under Bielsa as well, which I know people will go, why is that relevant? But he's played under a manager who has had experiences in several different leagues, which again I think can go a very, very long way into you as a player and adapting at an older age as well.
Absolutely. Now, the Ballon d'Or winner was announced this week, but we don't care about that, Justin. What caught my eye was the rankings, and I felt a bit like a proud father seeing Viktor Gyökeres being ranked 15th. He also won the Gerd Müller Trophy for being the highest goal scorer in European football. Easy to forget that he only left Coventry 2 years ago, isn't it? He's someone we saw a lot of in the Championship, and we were obviously big fans of him when he was here. But are you surprised at all at how well he's done since leaving the second tier?
Yes and no. I think what you could criticise him for sometimes at championship level was he was prolific, but he wasn't always clinical. And I think there's an element of he has worked on that, but I think I would look at him playing in Portugal and argue that that's not a really high level. But he did do really well in the Champions League. And I think it's worth pointing out. I think with Gyökeres, there's arguments and counter arguments, because he's also done it at international level with Sweden as well. So I think he's one of them where he's going to thrive in an environment where he becomes the main man, which is why I think Arsenal was a bit of a strange move for him. But that being said, I think when he was at Coventry, it's very hard to foresee a Championship player going on to be the 15th best player in the world within 3 years. I don't think.
Within 2 years?
Within 2 years. I don't think anyone could make that argument about anybody at this level at any point. Did anyone think when Gareth Bale came through at Southampton, he would become one of the world's best players? I don't think so, especially when he started to struggle at Spurs.
I'm not sure about that, because Bale was still very young at the time and was
he was
by far the best young player in the Championship.
He was, but then Ryan Sessegnon comes through at Fulham and arguably has a much better record at this level. And his career's not taken off as much as Bale's has. This is what I mean. It's so hard to measure and predict. But with Gyökeres, yeah, it's good to see it. And I think what's annoying is everyone's lauding Gyökeres for his recent spell, but no one's looking at his journey. He was shit at Swansea. really bad. And then it was a bit of a gamble at Coventry to sign him, 1.2 million, I think it was. And look at what he's done. Look at what he's achieved.
And if you speak to any Coventry fan and ask them what did they think when they signed Viktor Gyökeres, I think most were not very impressed with him because he was on loan there before, wasn't he? And when they signed him, I think many were quite confused why they spent what was a fair bit of money for Coventry at the time on this guy who wasn't very good for them on loan. But I guess it's a lesson to all of us, Justin, that if you just give a player a chance, then this is what they can do. I think by the time he left Coventry, I thought he was a good Premier League level striker. I'm not sure I expected him to flourish as much as he has done in 2 years. I thought he had all the ingredients to get to the level he's currently at now, but to do it so quickly it's incredible. I think, going back to what we were saying about just giving players a chance, it obviously helps when you have a top quality coach in Adi Vivesh, who's been credited with developing a lot of players like Gyökeres when he was at Coventry, and now he's at Middlesbrough. And if the start by Middlesbrough is anything to go by, he's doing a very good job there as well. But I think one thing that is often forgotten with Gyökeres, when he left Coventry, he was 25. So I guess that also shows that players can still go on to do an awful lot in their career after getting a big move at, I was going to say an old age, but 25 is not obviously an old age. You're not the typical youngster anymore, though, are you?
Well, no, you start to enter your peak years, and this is maybe what we're saying. But ultimately, I think, for someone to come from the Championship to win the Gerd Muller Trophy, being the highest goal scorer in European football, I think is astonishing. Like you said, his last game for Coventry was the playoff final, which they lost. I think he put his penalty away, mind. But now he's I saw he was ranked ahead of Vinny Jr., for example. Like, it is crazy, the rise. It is crazy.
Guy who played for Sheffield United.
Oh yes.
Vinicius,
just about,
as he's more commonly known, I think.
But I think what we've got there is it should add a lot more value to the Championship, because Gyökeres, I think, is a player who's had a stark rise to this stardom, but Harry Kane was just ahead of him, and he had his spells in the Championship and the EFL. This is it. Championship's the bedrock of world football. You heard it here first.
It's a breeding ground, isn't it, for young talent? I always say this because you look at the number of players who have come through the Championship over the years, and it just seems to be getting more and more prevalent. And you see more and more of these players going on to be world-class, like your Gyökereses and what have you. And I think that's only going to continue. And it just goes to show that if you want your young players to develop, even if they're just going out on loan, then this is the way to do it. But I also think more Premier League clubs should be looking at the Championship and be saying, these are guys who can really take their game to the next level if they're given the chance, which is the important thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to sign this off on, and to just raise a little bit of a thinking point for everybody else. I think we're seeing Premier League clubs more reluctant to send out their players to Championship, mainly because they're demanding stupid fees now. But we've seen time and time again how much of a success it can be. I mean, Mason Mount's a great example for Kato Tomori at Derby. The list goes on and on. Reece James at Wigan. These players come to Championship, they flourish, and then they go to their parent clubs and they kick up again. Tammy Abraham's another one. I think we're seeing less of that happen now, which I think if you're a parent club, surely it's in your best interest to let these players go out and let them freely go out. And I think what we're going to see over the next few years is probably less players actually hit their peak years at the right time, because they're not getting their work experience where they should do, which is the Championship.
Yeah, and I'm not going to disagree with you on that, Justin. And finally, from one former Championship striker banging them in to another, Oli Burke. Am I reading this right? Oli flipping Burke. He's become the first Scottish player ever to score a hat-trick in the Bundesliga. The 28-year-old was making just his second start for new club Union Berlin. I was saying a second ago, have you been surprised at how well Viktor Gyökeres has done? I think fans of Birmingham, Millwall, Sheffield United, West Brom, they will be surprised at how Oli Burke's got on.
Yeah, when I saw this, I immediately thought, could you put a video of him together, Ryan? Plug that, get that in there. You detailed his career, but with him, he's always had the assets to work with, hasn't he? He's quick, he's strong, he's a powerful player, but consistency has just never been his thing. And I did listen to a podcast a while ago talking about his move to Union Berlin. and they were allowing it because I think with that move, it was going to get more out of him. I can't exactly remember, but ultimately, I think players, they just go to a club and they can thrive, and I think this is going to be the case. It depends on which coach, but he's moved to Werder Bremen, didn't quite work out. His loan spells over here have not worked out. So hopefully this is a start we see Oli Burke really kick on.
Well, as you mentioned, I did do a YouTube video in the summer on Oli Burke because he has had such a bizarre career. I feel like I'm now an Oli Burke expert after that video because I spent a good 2 days studying his career. But with my championship hat on, I don't think any player was given as many chances as he was, despite producing so very little. And that aforementioned video ended up doing well. And I assume that's because so many fans at the clubs he's played for were like, yeah, he's garbage. But at Werder Bremen last season and now at Union Berlin, he seems to finally be producing. I think there's always been 3 big issues with him. Confidence, no manager ever being sure what his best position is, and constantly moving between clubs. Union Berlin are his 11th club at the age of 28. So hopefully he's now able to settle there. And you've seen the hat-trick, haven't you, Justin? Mm-hmm. His pace is unbelievable, but that's always been there. His strength has always been there. I think too many managers saw that pace and thought, winger, just straight down the line. He's a winger. When he's shown in Germany that he's best going through the middle. And if he starts scoring goals, then it becomes a regular habit with him.
Well, this is it. You suit a player and the style of play suits a player. It can just work. And I think when you've got someone who's quick and you play a system that sort of gets him behind opposition, 1 in 2, 1 in 3 chances get put away, he's on to a winner. But Oli Burke's one of those players. It'd be nice to see him thrive because he's not had that. He's not had enough love from supporters that he's played for. So for him to hopefully try and flourish now at Union Berlin, that'd be great. It'd be really good to see.
Yeah, he seems to be loving life. And considering he, at one point, was one of the most highly rated youngsters in the whole of Europe, now that he's finally having some luck, I think, even if you weren't a big fan of him when he played for your club, I think we can all agree that's nice to see because he deserves a bit of luck, finally. But there we go, ladies and gents. This has been a news roundup of everything going on from across the Championship over the past few days. We'll, of course, be back again tomorrow with the preview show where we're looking ahead to the weekend's action and making some bloody predictions. I believe, Justin, next week is our first set of midweek games. So we finally have a Thursday episode with some action to talk about, which is very, very exciting. So a lot to come across the Championship over the next week. So we look forward to seeing you then for all of that. But as I say, we'll be back again tomorrow making some predictions ahead of this weekend. But this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.